Welcome to Going Underground with me, Afshan Ratansi. Every Monday, Wednesday and Saturday, we're bringing you the stories that really matter in the United Kingdom, for those of you wishing to question more. In today's show, Atos claims to care about the disabled at the same time as they force hundreds of them back into work. And a miscarriage of justice? We get the inside track of what happened during the miners' strike in Orgreave, South Yorkshire, 30 years on. Plus, what if your minimum wage went up at the same rate as the salaries of the top 1%? We do the maths. For these stories and more, let's go underground. It may seem that Atos, the French IT company that decides whether disabled people are entitled to their benefits or not, are miracle workers. They can cure your handicap by simply saying you're okay. That might be because they work to a quota system set by Ian Duncan Smith's Department of Work and Pensions. Thanks to a whistleblower, we now know that under the guidelines, Atos is supposed to expect that 65% of people trying to claim disability benefit do not deserve any money at all. One of the most vocal opponents of coalition policy when it comes to the disabled has been a Labour Party veteran and long-time fighter for the most vulnerable in our society. With me is the Labour MP, the infamous Dennis Skinner. Dennis, welcome to Going Underground. What exercised you so much about what Atos is doing to your constituents and people with disabilities around the country?
Well, I've been onto this subject for quite some considerable time because I used to represent miners when I worked down the coal mine for tribunals. And I found out that Atos is not really a medical examination. They're not doctors they're examining. And what's more, in the case that I put before Parliament, the man had got elastic bandages on his legs. They never even looked at them. They merely asked him whether he could walk across the room, whether he could pick up a pencil, and simple sedentary things like that. And the net result was that they claimed that he was fit for work. The man, of course, had a big lump on his neck, which undoubtedly was part of the cancer that finally killed him. They told him that the appeal could not take place under 11 months. And that's because a large number of people are naturally appealing against these outrageous decisions. And so he waited and waited, and of course the cancer got worse, and it took his hearing, and it took his sight, and then it finally took his life before the appeal was even sent to him.
But even critics of the policy might say, well, that's an anomaly.
No. I had more than 150 emails, and nearly every one was from someone who had received similar kind of treatment.
Can you see that the policy was kind of brought in because the destruction of British manufacturing industry, people started to think, certainly on the right.
Well, Thatcher destroyed the British manufacturing industry.
And so disability benefit came to replace unemployment benefit in some of those mining communities.
Yeah, but are you aware that when they shut the pits after 1992, when the famous Heseltine last 31 pits, and the whole of the pits in Derbyshire had been closed where I used to work, and unemployment was 80% in one of my villages, because the miners, or the miners of the future, couldn't have a job because everything was circled around mining, they decided to let them get invalidity benefit, and they didn't have to go to check for it. So the reason why a lot of this happened was because of the destruction of the manufacturing base. A lot of these people would, in many circumstances, that are unemployed, would have been in those kind of jobs. But in this case, the man wasn't a miner. He was a butcher on a farm. He used to carve up the meat. And of course, he got these ulcerated legs and it got worse. They never even looked at him and said that he was fit for work. He died of cancer, as I said in Parliament, and the result was that literally hundreds of people were telling me, yes, it's just like mine. And the reason why the appeal system is 11 to 12 months is because so many people are appealing against these outrageous decisions. It's not being done by clinicians.
But maybe it's a deliberate attempt.
Of course
I mean,
it's
the
deliberate.
Tories
now
know
you've
this.
got to it. Now you understand more clearly. Yes, that's exactly what it is.
And it's been successful.
Absolutely, from their point of view, they want people off the benefit system so that they can claim that they're conquering this evil, when really what should be happening is people should be tested medically like they used to be.
But of course it was your party that brought Atos in.
Yes, and
Why
they
would the
were
Labour
wrong.
Party have brought that in then?
Because they thought, and unemployment was relatively low, they thought it was all right. I wouldn't support it. I never have. So don't blame me, because I've never been a member of the Labour government, the Blair government, or whatever. I opposed it then, and I oppose it now. And it should be abolished because it's not fit for purpose. And those two elderly people in my constituency had to live on £70 a week for 11 months. And that's why I asked for an ex gratia payment in Parliament to be paid to these two people near Bolsover to make up for all the pain, suffering and loss of income.
Will you pass these people in the corridors of power at the Palace of Westminster? Ian Duncan Smith, Frank Field. Ian Duncan Smith seems pretty proud of it. Okay, he'll say these cases exist, but 16,500 people shouldn't have been on the benefit.
He's an extreme right-winger in the Tory party.
But what do you say about the 16,500 that came off disability benefits after the Atos vetting?
A lot of them come off benefits because they like the man from Calon. They give in. The appeal system is so long that people say, what's happened to my appeal? Why can't I have it? Oh, it's 11 months, it's 12 months. That's the system now. So they give in.
And so Ed Miliband is saying that he's keeping the same spending regime.
I've told him to get rid of it. I said, you should always remember the things you can do in politics that don't cost you money. And that's one of them. Get doctors to supervise the people that come for the medical.
Presumably Miliband said to you, no, it was Labour that brought in Serco, G4S,
no, well,
Atos.
we'll see. He has taken certain steps against things that happened under the Labour government. And I'll tell you another thing he ought to do. Don't think he's likely to do it, but I'll mention it on RT. And that is he should take over the energy companies. Take them back into public ownership.
But Miliband doesn't seem to be looking at things that way, does
I
he?
can only say what I think. I'm not responsible for anybody else. When I came here to Parliament, I decided I wouldn't go on foreign trips. I decided that I'd pay my own way in life and that I wouldn't go in the bars and all the rest of it. And I wouldn't pair with the Tories to enable them to go to Royal Ascot and Cheltenham and God knows where else.
What is it like in that gentleman's club then? What is it like in the gentleman's club these days, and how different is it?
I've never been in any of those areas. Can't you understand that? It is possible after 43 years, I have never been on a foreign trip paid for either by a dodgy government abroad or the British taxpayer.
But then in return for that, do they silence you by not letting you on the media?
No, the media silence me. That's why it's unusual today that I'm speaking on the media, because the BBC to a large extent don't like it, because I happen to say they were talking about people that are on high incomes and high salaries, and I said take that Andrew Neil for instance, that right winger on Daily Politics, who's had more hair transplants than Michael Jackson, and that was the end of it.
Don't criticise
so
Andrew Neil on
don't tell
TV.
me the media are pure. The problem with Britain today is that there is a greater preponderance of right-wing newspapers than at any time in my life and yours.
Of course,
43% of it is owned by Murdoch, and he's got Sky News into the bargain. Ultra right-wing, and then you've got the Daily Mail, the Rothermere Press, and the Daily Telegraph. Where are the left-wing newspapers?
Okay, but Parliament has younger people coming in. What do they think of Atos and all these? Are they just kowtowing to the right-wing press?
A lot of people thank me for doing it in Parliament, believe me, on the Labour side. A lot of people.
Well, because they're cowards, they wouldn't say it.
No, that's not true. Others have talked about Atos. I don't know why you adopt this attitude that somehow or other there aren't a lot of people in Parliament on the Labour side who agree with me.
The Prime Minister told 1,800 delegates at an October conference that Britain would be open to selling off more of its national infrastructure to foreign investors. But did you know how many quintessential British brands are now managed from overseas boardrooms? At 6 is Boots the Chemist, created in the 19th century by Nottinghamshire pharmacist John Boot. The company now belongs to the New York hedge fund KKR, whose chairman is none other than disgraced former CIA chief General David Petraeus. Watch out for killer drones in your cough medicine. Arriva is number 5 in our countdown. Thanks to conservative privatisation of transport in Britain, Arriva runs buses and trains right across the country. Except it isn't private anymore, or British. It's owned by the German government. Number 4 is chocolate company Cadbury, begun by the Cadbury family in Birmingham in 1824, and infamous for profiting from the slave trade, as well as dairy milk. The British taxpayer, via bailed-out bank RBS, helped sell it off to the Americans, and it's now owned by a Kraft food spin-off, Mondelez International. What could be more British than Branston pickle, hallmark of that great UK culinary delicacy, the ploughman's lunch, and number 3 in our countdown. First made in 1922 in the Branston suburb of Burton-upon-Trent, it's now owned by Japanese sake and vinegar company Mizkan. At number 2 is your local Asda supermarket, managed by America's Arkansas-based Walton family. Hillary Clinton once used to be on the board, and the parent company Walmart is notorious for sweatshop practices. And at number 1 is that lucky near monopoly on national gambling, Camelot. The infamous tax on the poor, the lottery, was sold off to a Canadian government-sponsored pension company. Not one lottery winner has ever won the amount it was sold for, though, £400 million. So when you buy your ticket, now twice the price, remember how you're helping teachers in Ontario. Wonder how much you would get if your salary jumped up at the same rate as the pay of top CEOs, plus what really happened during the miners' strike in 1984. Join us after the break to find out. In the next few days, the government is expected to reveal what actually happened during the miners' strike at Orgreave in South Yorkshire back in 1984. It was one of the most seminal moments in 20th century UK industrial relations. Thousands of miners at Orgreave went on strike, only to be met by what has been alleged with state-sanctioned violence. Senior QCs have alleged police officers falsified evidence, and there are ongoing accusations about the collusion of MI5. Under the 30-year rule, we can finally know what was the role of Margaret Thatcher's government in the brutal clash between police and workers. That is, of course, if the secret state papers, due for release, didn't get mysteriously lost. With me is Ian Lavery, the Labour MP for Wansbeck. He was president of the National Union of Mine Workers. Welcome to Going Underground. Ian, what exactly was the role of the state and MI5 in the events in Orgreave in 1984?
Well, I'm hoping, with it being 30 years since the strike, that the papers which will be due for publication, the secret documentation, the hidden files, will be up for release very shortly, and I'm hoping that'll reveal the full scale of the operations of MI5 and the state in the role of the miners' strike. But I think the real issue here is what role did the government play, at what level, and we're absolutely confident, by the way, it was at the very highest level, Margaret Thatcher, the cabinet, all the way down to MI5, the judiciary system, the police as well. So we believe that these documents will show how much the state intervened in an industrial dispute. Although on past practices, it might be the case whereby much of the evidence is heavily redacted, it perhaps kept for another 10, 20, 30 years before release. We're not sure on that.
In line with national security, as an excuse
well,
would be
that's the exact reason they'll give, in line with national security. But in the national interest, is it not right that this documentation should be published so people can see exactly what role the government, the Prime Minister, the judiciary system, and indeed the police themselves, from the the very, very top, the chief inspectors, right down to the bobby on the picket line, what role they actually played. We need to know this, because you see, if we could have proven a whole number of things in 1984-85, then perhaps the same people in the policing structure, the judiciary system, this might not have happened at Hillsborough, what actually did happen, because it was the same template, the same police force, and in many ways the same people carrying out the same things at Hillsborough, what they did in 1984.
Do you believe that Hillsborough was a kind of training exercise for police officers to police the miners' strike?
No, well, actually, the miners' strike was in 1984. Hillsborough was later than that.
The later elements of strike action.
I'm firmly of the view
90s.
that the police, the system got away, the state got away with that much without any questions being asked, without anything being unearthed, that they used the same sort of tactics again in Hillsborough, hoping that that would be the same thing. Hidden documents, secret documents, statements being rewritten, and this sort of thing. So we've seen what happened in '84, and that was replicated at Hillsborough. That could have been avoided if the questions had been asked at the time.
Your predecessor as president of the NUM, Arthur Scargill, was arrested at Orgreave. He claims he's seen something called the Scargill conspiracy file at South Yorkshire Police Headquarters. What does he mean by that? What do you think?
Well, I mean, Arthur would be the man to answer that question.
But
it's
difficult to get him on.
He
doesn't trust the media that much.
I wonder why.
We'll get on to that.
The
file,
reality is they'll have files on Arthur Scargill. MI5, MI6 will have files on people in the coal mining industry. And if you're even a left-winger now, they've got files on you, they're keeping tabs on you. And again, this should come out in the documentation on the 30-year rule.
Because it was alleged that there were intelligence officers at the very highest levels of the NUM leadership.
It's been alleged that Joe Gormley, for example, who was the General Secretary of the National Union of Mine Workers, had links with MI5. How true that is, I'm not sure, but the media suggested that he had those connections. There's also other issues with other members of staff at the National Union of Mine Workers during that time, had links with the secret services. I mean, this isn't a James Bond movie. This was an industrial dispute involving ordinary, hard-working people and the communities.
Now on to the media and why Arthur Scargill doesn't do many media appearances. Tell us a little bit about the deliberate bias on the part of the BBC and national newspapers when it came to the strike.
Well, I think during the strike, I mean, I was involved in the strike as a young lad, and we suffered greatly as a result of not a media blackout, but a media bias towards the National Coal Board, towards the government at the time. The Orgreave dispute is a real good example, one of the best examples you'll ever see, and ever likely to see, and that is where on the news, the night of the Orgreave, the day where it really kicked off, BBC showed on the 6 o'clock news the miners attacking policemen on the picket line, mounted policemen as well, when in fact that just didn't happen. And the BBC have apologised since. What did happen is, it was the other way around. The mounted police and the police attacked the pickets and the miners. The newspapers, for example, were all anti-Scargill, all anti-trade union. But look, when you look now at the reports that was in the papers at that point in time, look at the truth, look what's happened. We've only got 3 pits left. At the time McGregor came in, he said he was only going to close 20 pits, and then you'll see from the documents which will be published, there's at least 75 pits was intended to be closed. We're deceiving people. McGregor, Thatcher, the government were deceiving the miners. All the miners wanted, by the way, during that strike was communities in which to live and collieries in which to work. That's what the dispute was about.
And now we import energy resources, which was the point made at the time of the strike.
Well, in terms of coal, we import about up to 50 million tonnes of coal a year, and that's the size of 50 large collieries. We're burning 68 million tonnes of coal in this country.
And I remember because they said 8-year-olds in Colombia are mining that coal.
And that's still happening. We're burning up to 68 million tonnes of coal per year. The coal industry, or coal, is producing up to 50% of the electricity generated in this country now. 50%, not 15, 50. So why do we not, or why should we not have kept on with the coal mining industry, keeping these communities vibrant, and making sure that we produced our own coal reserves for the people in this country? It's simple economics.
How do you look on the fact that 30 years since Orgreave, not one police officer has been charged after the events of that day in 1984, the June day in 1984?
Well, it's absolutely outrageous, isn't it, that, you know, you had a situation where miners, there was probably about 10,000 police officers at Orgreave, and there was probably about 6,000 miners there. Again, the media would probably say it was the other way around, but, you know, that's exactly what we believe, roughly, that 10,000 police officers, mounted police officers, in addition with dogs and shields and batons, and maybe 6,000 miners there. And the issue there was, of course, is what happened on the day. The miners were encouraged and coerced into a pincer movement, a trap, by the police. And all of a sudden, there was a huge attack on these individuals. And let us not forget, that was a state interference. These miners, you know, I mean, I'm not saying everybody was angels, and you know, I'm not saying that, but they were hard-working people, and they were there picketing lawfully, not unlawfully, lawfully there, and as a result of that, 95 people were taken to court for different misdemeanors, for righteous behaviour, unlawful meeting. And as a result of that, they went to court in 1987, I believe, and every one of those 95 were released. And then the union went and took the South Yorkshire Police to court because of the malicious prosecutions, unlawful arrests, and damages were awarded to, I think, nearly £500,000 was awarded to some of the 95 people who were arrested. Okay, but not one officer at any level, not one, has even been disciplined as a result.
So now you're going to write to the IPCC?
Well, I've written to the IPCC.
Independent Police Complaints Commission. What do you expect from them?
Well, I've written to them. I set an EDM in Parliament last year, saying that there should be an investigation into the policing, not just of Orgreave, but into the policing of the miner strike. Because, you know, Orgreave was a huge issue, and it was a nasty affair. It was a one-day affair where a lot happened in a short space of time. But the mining communities of the length and breadth of the UK suffered as a consequence with many Orgreaves every day of every week. I want justice for these miners who, in the main, will be in their 50s and 60s now, who were arrested, whether it be at Orgreave or whether it be in any other area, whether it be in their own community. I want justice for these people because they're not criminals and they shouldn't have been charged in the first place. Ian Lavery, former President of the National Union of Mine Workers, thank you.
Forget the debate over whether the minimum wage is actually a living wage. Instead, what would it look like if it kept pace with the pay rises of Britain's top company directors? Well, the median salary increases for the FTSE 100 CEOs went up on average by 14% between 1999 and today. So, poor CEOs who were getting only £1 million a year back then are now getting around £7 million a year. And those on the minimum wage? Well, after the Labour Party's fight with Conservatives who opposed it tooth and nail, it was set at £3.60 an hour back in 1999. And now it's only a meagre £6.31 an hour. But if the minimum wage had gone up the way it did for executives, it should be around the £25 an hour mark. Join us next time as we go underground to bring you the latest beneath the mainstream from around the UK. Don't forget, you can drop us a line on Twitter at underground_RT, like our page on Facebook, or email us goingunderground@rttv.co.uk. See you on Monday.